Good morning, boys and girls. So today we are going to be talking about a new story called Pushing Up the Sky. So before we begin our lesson, I need you to go get a few items. You will need your reading textbooks, page 408, 409. You will also need a pencil and a scrap piece of paper. So go ahead and pause the video and please go get those items. Okay, go ahead and turn to page 408, 409 in your reading textbooks. So we're going to be talking about our target skill this week. And our target skill this week is called literary elements. Your teacher may have also taught and said the word story elements. It means the same thing. Now we have already talked about literary elements earlier in the year with a different story. So this should be a little bit of a review for you. So when we talk about literary elements, we talk about different things such as characters, setting, and plot. Now when we talk about all of those things, these are the things that we put together. They're just pieces that we put together to make the entire story. So let's break it down. Let's first talk about characters. Characters are people or animals within a story. And when an author introduces us to characters in the story, we can learn a lot about the characters. We can learn more about them, how they might change, what they say, what they may do within the story. So characters are a very, very important part of the story because the characters make the story. The next thing we're going to talk about is the setting. Remember, the setting is where and when the story takes place. So where and when the story takes place. And the last thing is the plot. The plot of the story includes everything that happens from the beginning, the middle, and then finally the end. So the plot is just going in sequence from what happens from the beginning of the story to the middle of the story and to the end of the story. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reading our story on page 409 called An Up and Down Story. We're going to read this story and then we're going to fill out a literary elements chart. So as I read you the story, I want you to think about those different pieces the author will put together to help us make the story. The characters, the setting, and the plot. Because we're going to be filling out a graphic organizer that relates to all of that. So let's go ahead and look at page 409. It says, "Timber!" I heard Dad yell. I ran to my bedroom window and saw one of the trees in our backyard come crashing to the earth. It just missed hitting the garage. Mom and I rushed outside. "What in the world are you doing now?" Mom asked. Dad set down his axe and said, "I'm making a story pole." Mom rolled her eyes. Last summer, we visited a place in Olympia, Washington that had a story pole. Chief Shelton had carved animal figures into a cedar tree. The pole tells a story about Chief Shelton's Snohomish culture. He worked on it for 5 years. When he died in 1938, other people in the tribe finished the carvings. "Can I help?" I asked. "Sure, Billy," Dad said. "So what kind of animal should we put at the top of our pole?" I asked. "How about a mule?" Mom suggested. Now, if I think about that story, I know that I was introduced to several characters. I also know and I can tell from what I read more about the characters. What do you think you can tell me about how Mom feels about the story pole? How do you think Mom feels about Dad cutting down a tree and making a story pole? What do you think? Yeah, I don't think she was too happy, because what did she do in the story? She rolled her eyes. Right here it says Mom rolled her eyes. So if a character rolls their eyes at something, do you think that they approve or they're happy about what's going on? Probably not. Probably not. So that is something that we can tell from our literary elements with characters. We learn more about the characters by what they say or their actions. And we know just from Mom's actions of rolling her eyes that she's probably not happy about Dad's project. Now, what do you think about the other characters? Billy, yeah. How do you think Billy feels about it? Well, it sounds like he's pretty excited, because what does he want to do at the end? Exactly. He wants to help. He wants to help his dad at the end of the story. So we know that Billy is probably excited about what's going on. He probably thinks it's a pretty cool project to do with his dad. And we know, obviously, if Dad's cutting down the tree to make a story pole, he's pretty happy about making it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to fill out this chart. So if you're at home and you do not have this chart, you can just go ahead and draw something very similar where you label it characters, setting, and plot. That way you can help fill this in with us at home. Okay, so who were the character or characters within the story? Who were they? Well, who cut down the story pole? Dad. So Dad cut down the tree to make the story pole. So we do have Dad. Who else do we have? Mom. We do have Mom. And who's telling the story? Who is telling the story? It didn't come out and tell us. Who's telling the story? Do you know what we call someone that tells the story that doesn't give the name? Is a narrator. A narrator. So the narrator is the person that tells the story, okay? In this case, at the end, we were able to figure out who the narrator is. Who is that narrator? Does anybody know? You guessed it. It was Billy. So I'm going to put Billy's name in parentheses. Okay, I'm going to put Billy's name. Because right here, can I help? I asked. Sure, Billy, Dad said. Billy is our narrator. He's the one that's telling us the story. Okay, so we have all of our characters in the story. We have all the characters in our story. Now let's go to setting. Remember, setting is where and when the story takes place. Where and when the story takes place. So where do you think this setting is? Where did all of this happen? Yeah, the story takes place in the family's backyard. How do you know that? How do you know that it took place in the backyard? Well, if you go up to your story or your paragraph at the top, you can see that in our backyard, the tree came crashing to the earth. It just missed hitting the garage. So we know that it's in the family's backyard. So go ahead and write family's backyard. And boys and girls, we can also assume that when do you think that he did this? During the day. we're going to say that he did it during the day, because we can make the assumption that he's not going to be cutting down a tree at night when he's not able to see, okay? So the setting where and when the story takes place is in the family's backyard during the day. All right, boys and girls, now we have the plot. Remember, the plot means the story that includes what happens at the beginning, the middle, and the end. So let's think about that. When you read a story, it's important to remember or recall what happened at the beginning of the story, what happened in the middle of the story, and then finally what happened at the end of the story. If you do that in sequence, boys and girls, your comprehension or understanding of the story will be much easier. So what happened at the beginning of the story? What is Dad doing? Dad wants to make a story pole. Remember, he cut down that tree, and Mom and Billy rushed outside asking what he was doing, and he said, I'm making a story pole. So we could say that Dad makes a story pole. So Dad is going to be making a story pole, okay? Now, where do you think that Dad got this idea from? It told us in the middle of the story. Where do you think Dad got this whole idea of making a story pole from? Yeah, it said in the middle of the story how they went and visited a place in Olympia, Washington that had a story pole. And it talked about Chief Shelton carving this story pole because he was so proud of his culture, okay? Now, do you think that someone who carves from a tree for 5 years, and he wasn't even finished because it said that the tribe had to help finish the carvings, I would say that Chief Shelton was a very good artist. I would say that he was a very good artist. I hope Dad is just as good as Chief Shelton for his story pole. So we can say that he got the idea from a place they visited last year. He got the idea from a place they visited last year. Oops, I'm sorry. That's a V. So far for the plot, we have Dad makes a story pole. He got the idea from a place they visited last year. And remember, what happens at the end? What happens at the end? Yeah, Billy's going to help him. Yeah, Billy wants to help. Billy wants to help his dad. So go ahead and write all that information, boys and girls. So you just completed literary elements. We talked about the characters within the story, dad, mom, narrator, the person that's telling the story, which we found out was Billy. The setting, where and when the story takes place, which in this case it took place in the family's backyard during the day. And the plot. Plot is what happened at the beginning, the middle, and the end. Remember, Dad starts making that story pole. He cuts down that tree. He got the idea from a place they visited last year. And Billy wants to help his dad. Billy wants to help his dad make that story pole. Boys and girls, literary elements. They're the pieces that we put together that make the story. So as you read, think about those characters. Think about how they changed or what they did or how they acted throughout the entire story. Think about the setting. where and when the story takes place that you're reading. And think about that plot. Ask yourself those questions. What happened at the beginning? What happened in the middle? And what happened at the end? That is story elements or literary elements. You guys did a fantastic job. Make sure you are always asking those questions to yourself as you're reading, because that will only help your comprehension. Great job, boys and girls.